Welcome to Leadership Matters, a podcast from the Bailey Group. I'm your host, Kaylee Thomsen, president of and partner at the Bailey Group, where we believe better leaders create healthier workplace environments, healthier humans, and a better world. On this show, we explore real stories, practical insights, and honest conversations to help you lead yourself and others better. Thanks for joining us. Let's dive in. Welcome back to Leadership Matters. I'm your host, Kaylee Thomsen, and today on Leadership Matters, I'm honored to welcome Patience Ferguson. Patience is an extraordinary human resources leader. She's a transformational thinker and a public service champion. Patience brings over 30 years of experience building HR functions and advancing inclusive workplace cultures across sectors, from nonprofit organizations to city government and the Federal Reserve Bank of Minneapolis. Most recently, Patience stepped into her role as Chief Human Resources Officer for Ramsey County, Minnesota, where she leads HR strategy for a workforce of 4,000, drives initiatives that strengthen employee engagement, equity, inclusion, and organizational effectiveness. Ramsey County is the 37th largest employer in the state of Minnesota, which was fascinating for me to learn, and also happens to be the most diverse county in the state. Patience, I'm so grateful you're here. Welcome to Leadership Matters.
Thank you. I'm honored to have a conversation with you.
So I would love to start at the beginning, Patience. How did you first get into the world of human resources?
That's a very good question. My path to human resources is fairly unconventional. I've always been fascinated by the human experience. And quite frankly, it was a result of that. And really, even before I knew, concretely what my values were, I had a life-changing experience with an employer where I was not treated fairly. And through that process, I went and really checked into what my values were and made a decision that what happened to me, I didn't want to happen to anyone else. As a result of that, just through a series of events and through relationships that I had at the time, I entered into the world of human resources by becoming head of HR for the YWCA of Minneapolis. And if you know anything about the YWCA of Minneapolis, its mission is to eliminate racism and empower women and girls. And so the director at the time took a chance on me. I had done work as a consultant. I had done work in organization development. I had also done board recruitment for an organization called MAP for Nonprofits, where I was a bridge builder between the corporate community and the nonprofit community. So while I had the skills of human resources, I didn't have the formal skills in human resources. And as a result of that, I built the HR department. I was there for over 9 years. And we did some amazing things there. Did their first engagement survey, redid their performance management process, put a leadership development program, introduced the HR business partner model, and then introduced metrics to have a path of us really looking at how our results were. And also really deepened HR's role in the community. And so through that process and being there for 9 wonderful years under Becky Roloff, I then was recruited to the city of Minneapolis, which was a larger footprint. At that time, they had over 3,000 employees, 22 departments. And I left the YWCA and was there for 9 years and built that department using the same tools that I used at the YWCA, but it was a much more complex environment. It was 92% union, and we were able to really do some amazing things at the city of Minneapolis under first R.T. Ryback, then it was Betsy Hodges, and then Mayor Jacob Fry. So that was my first opportunity to work in government. And what I really learned there was that we have an obligation in human resources to not only bring people together and have good practices, but to never forget who the audience and who we serve. And in that case, we serve the residents and we serve the community. And then leaving there, I was recruited, actually, while I was still there, I was recruited to the Federal Reserve Bank, and I was there for a little over 2.5 years. And again, different organization, It has a local reach and obviously a national reach, and pretty much did the same thing. I always go in as a listener, really try to understand the organization, and I try to do it in two ways. One is the strategic piece, which is very important in human resources. I also have to do the operational piece, and I always want to know who my audiences are and who we're here to serve. And what
Mm,
impressed me at the time when I came to the Federal Reserve Bank is when I went on their website and they said they wanted to pursue economy that worked for all of us. That's what
mm,
drew me to the Federal Reserve Bank. And so I was able to introduce some promising practices in that organization to elevate the work of the employees there. We also did some things on a national level in terms of just elevating the work that we were doing at the Federal Reserve Bank and get my team even more engaged on the national level. And then I took a break, and then I was recruited to Ramsey County, of which I started there in August of 2025. And I'm
wow.
using the same principles and practices that I've used at the other three organizations. It's a bigger footprint from a local perspective, much more complex. As we all know, we're in very challenging times. When I was at the city of Minneapolis, I was there in the forefront of the pandemic and the murder of George Floyd, and I was there doing that. And then, pivoting and fast forwarding to Ramsey County and all the things that we are getting involved in, whether it's Operation Metro Surge, whether it's trying to figure out how do we get support and resources to the community that we serve, and not forgetting the employee experience, because if we don't have a really strong employee experience, we can't adequately serve the residents of this wonderful county called Ramsey County. But the
Mm,
principles and practices that I use are always the same. It's around operational excellence, it's around diversity and its inclusion, and at the end of the day, we have to produce results.
yeah. So powerful. And so many different directions I want to go, Patience. Thank you for that thorough background. I think where I want to go first is one of the things I really appreciate and admire about your story is you took what could be a very challenging thing to move past, being treated unfairly and really in just gross ways, into something that you've curtailed into immeasurable impact. And I'm curious, what was it about you or your upbringing or maybe your formative experiences or your mindsets that really helped you be resilient in such a challenging season?
Well, first of all, it has a lot to do with a few of the support systems I had. My number one support system has always been my family. And, my mother never graduated from high school. She dropped out of high school when she was in the 11th grade. And my mother was a maid. And so we lived in Oklahoma City, which is called the east side of Oklahoma City. And my mother got up every morning, put on her uniform, and she went and cleaned homes for one of the wealthiest families in Oklahoma City. And I knew, but my mother actually spoke better English than I did. So she never let who she was define who she was. My father was a cab driver and also a minister who had served in the Air Force. And so from him, I learned that relationships were very important. And from both of them, I also learned never forget where you come from. So my
Mm,
family was they were the first support system that I knew. Secondarily was my community. I grew up in an all Black neighborhood, and it was a very integrated neighborhood in the sense that we had people of all incomes and backgrounds in my neighborhood. So I had civil rights leaders, I had police
mm,
officers. Many of the teachers were champions in the civil rights movement. And so most of them were women. We had business owners in our community. And I like to tell people, people know who Kanye West was, but what most people don't know is Kanye West's mother was from Oklahoma. His
mm,
father owned a business, his uncle owned a business in Oklahoma City. So I grew up seeing business owners. I grew up with teachers. I grew up with people telling me that I could do whatever I wanted to do. And so I had a community of support. And because I grew up in a community that had a very strong cultural foundation and a commitment to excellence and a family, and then the third component of that is my faith. And so
Mm,
those are the 3 areas, if you will, that really gave me the foundation to know that, number 1, you gotta have something to stand on. You have to
mhm.
have values that are important to you. And then I've always tried to operate with those sets of values. And values are the things for me that never have been shaken. And so no matter what I went to, no matter what I've gone through, my family has always been there. My community has always been there. And my faith has always been there. And so
Good.
when I've been through situations, even in an employment situation that has been most challenging, those are the 3 tenets of my life that have continued to give me strength. And so that's the reason why I am the way that I am. And, I'm very grateful for those experiences because those are the experiences that have shaped me that no matter how bad things go, I know that I have a foundation that I can pull from. And
Yeah.
I know that those foundations give me the love, the support, and the nurturing I do to not only be concerned about myself, but also to be concerned about other people.
And that is a through line that I heard, the whole genesis of I went into HR because I didn't want what happened to me to happen to anyone else. I just hear that desire to make a difference through all of your different experiences.
That's very true.
So you talked about building HR functions across these different types of institutions, organizations. What's something most of us outside of the world of HR may be surprised to learn about what HR really does?
Well, that's an extremely good question. I think a lot of times, even when I talk to people, say I'm in the airport or just having casual conversations with people, there is in the external world sometimes a misconception that all that people in HR do is we just have paperwork and we push papers. And that is part of that's what we call in the HR world as transactions. But, the human resource function is really the backbone of an organization. We're the heart and soul of the organization. And because a lot of times, if it's an effectively run organization, we're the people who make sure that we have the practices. We serve dual roles. So, number one, we do have to represent the enterprise, but we also have to be the voice of the employee. And our role is to be the bridge builder between all of those. And so that's, I think, in a nutshell, what human resources is about. It's trying to work to make sure that employees are heard, that employees are valued, employees are supported. But at the same time, we also want to mitigate risk and we also want to be there for our employers as well. So it's very important, regardless of if it's a small HR function or it's a large HR function, we always need to know what's going on in the outside world, particularly after the pandemic and the murder of George Floyd. The social realm begin to come into the workforce. So when you think of all the social kinds of things, whether it was around race, ethnicity, or just a pandemic that nobody anticipated, all of a sudden what was going on the outside world began to infiltrate the inside world. You saw more employees, whether they worked in corporate, nonprofit, or government, they started speaking their truth in the organizations. They
Mm,
started saying, we're not comfortable with the way things are, and because they were bringing their lived experiences to work. Historically, that's not something that's been valued. That's not been
mhm.
something that has been accepted. But people are bringing their lived experience at work. And as our generations have expanded, you're seeing more of that. And so human resources should be, in a perfect world, that bridge builder, the voice
Mm.
of the employee, but then they also need to make sure that they're in alignment with the goals of the organization. And that, in my personal opinion, that's the secret sauce that we bring to the table. And at the end of the day, we also should be able to show value added. We want to be able to show results. We want to be able to show how we're impacting the bottom line. If you're in corporate America, then you're beholden to the shareholders. If you're in a nonprofit or government, you are beholden to the community. But no matter what sector you're in, you've got to be able to demonstrate that what you're doing in human resources truly adds value to the
Mm.
organization and to the community.
That's really great. And I love how you talk about how, yes, there's paperwork or transactions, I think you said is the word you use in the HR world, but it's not just administrative. There's this strategic element and this bridge building. I just think that's such a visual that certainly resonates with me, knowing the impact of a really thoughtful and intentional HR function within organizations. So you've led in large institutions, some with long histories and deeply embedded systems, patients. What impact do you hope your leadership continues to have, especially for people navigating systems that weren't necessarily built for them in mind? You talked about how things have evolved and changed, and new generations and what they're looking for and what they're bringing into workforces. Talk about how you're thinking about all of this and showing up in this.
Well, I think that's a good question. I think I always come in as a learner. I never want to feel as if I have all the answers because, quite frankly, I don't. And every place that I've ever worked has always been different. So,
Mm,
younger employees fascinate me. Older employees fascinate me. I'm one of those kind of people that I sometimes forget I'm the CHRO because people fascinate me so much. And so what I hope I bring to the table is realness and authenticity because
mm,
I feel that, because of how I've grown up and my path has been certainly very unconventional. But I hope and my desire is that I bring a realness to people. I bring an openness to people to really want to hear what their learning is. And then my brain starts ticking to figure out, how can we elevate this voice? I think one of the things that I also try to do in my work is elevate and amplify.
mm,
What that means is it is not important for you to always hear from Patience Ferguson. I know who I am. I've been in this game a long time. What's more important for me is to build those opportunities for those voices that nobody hears. Because
mm,
there's a kernel of wisdom, there are opportunities for people, there's wisdom that you hear from people that you may not ever hear from, but because I'm in a position of power, I can create that pathway that voice is getting heard. And you know
mm,
what? All you need is one good idea. All you need is one perspective that can change the trajectory of an organization. And what I hope is in my role, I've never, ever been ashamed of who I am as a woman. I've never been ashamed of being a Black woman. I've never been ashamed of being a person who was going to tell you what they think. I'm hoping that how I live my life will open up opportunities for people who may look like me or who may not look like me to feel that they can be safe and they can belong and they can have the sense of security that they're going to be listened to, they're going to be valued, and they're going to be heard. And even
mm,
if their idea or their perspective is not taken, they will always be respected. And that's
mm.
how I hope that when I'm in an organization, that I bring that authenticity and realness to everybody that I come in contact with.
Yeah.
And that, in my opinion, is my secret sauce.
I know we don't know each other real well, but we have had a couple of conversations. And that is very much my experience of you patients. And I,
Thank
I
you.
just appreciate that and find it so inspiring.
Thank you.
Authenticity is certainly a through line through this conversation as well. And there was a moment where you referenced really taking the time to get deeply acquainted with your own values and continuing to go back to your values and how it has been such a firm foundation in the shakeable, chaotic seasons of life, keeping you firmly planted and unshakable. Can you talk to us a little bit about how did you go about discovering what those values were and how has knowing what those values are really been such a source of solid footing for you?
Well, thanks for asking the question. As you were saying that, I went back and reflected on when did I really started thinking about what my values were. And it was when this particular situation happened to me many, many, many years ago. At that time, I was also accepted into a program that is still in existence and it's called the James P. Shannon Leadership Institute. And if you know anything about James P. Shannon, he was, if I'm not mistaken, he was head of the Minneapolis Foundation, who was a priest, and the institute is still going on. And when this particular situation happened to me, I had also got accepted into this program, and it was comprised of leaders throughout the entire country. And one of the things that we did, met once a month, people from all over the United States, and this is a local program. And part of our journey was really thinking about what our values were. And so I had a dedicated group of people. We did a lot of core work. We did a lot of things individually, but that's the first time that I had to sit with myself and really think about what my values were. And
Mm.
so that is what I continue to do that. That because I was at a crossroad in my career, that was exactly what I needed to have during that time when I was feeling beaten down. I was feeling like no one cared. Once I began to develop those values, it was like I got a strength that I didn't even know I had. And so throughout my life and throughout my journey, those are the things that have kept me and have sustained me even when it didn't seem like things were going my way. And I continue to use those values to this day because it's my anchor. Even when things don't seem to be going right, I go back to, I go back to how I grew up. I go back and I hear my father's voice, who are you? Whose child are you? You are the daughter of
Mm.
Willie Sherman. You are the daughter of Beulah May Sherman. And don't you ever forget it. So those
Mm.
are the things that continue to sustain me. And, sometimes it's tough because sometimes you wish you didn't have values because then the values start talking to you.
Yeah.
And then other work. It's not just about that. It's, I am a student. And so I'm constantly, you know, assessing myself and looking at myself and having people to give me feedback. Because sometimes it can be kind of, when you're in a leadership position, sometimes it can be a bit daunting. And so I have people that hold me accountable. I have my sister circle. I have my own
Mm.
family members. I'm checking in with people. Does this make sense? Right? I have colleagues throughout my career and relationships that I've built. And so those are the things that give me joy. And even in the things that I volunteer, I do my volunteer work that's in alignment with my values.
Mm.
Try to work in organizations that are in alignment with my values because I don't want to be one way one time and another way another time. I don't have that kind of capacity. I can't switch like that. And
Yeah.
I think because I'm very intentional, it keeps me aligned, it keeps me focused, and it keeps me being authentic because I don't have
Mm.
to bait and switch. So now it's just a part of my fabric and who I am.
Was there a moment when you realized your values would cost you something and you chose to stand in them anyway?
Absolutely. I won't give any specifics around that. I am in human resources. But yeah, I but yes, I have had situations where my values have been in question and it's been very stressful for me. It's been very harried to me. And in
Mm.
those cases, I am never shy to go to therapy, to do a check-in with myself because it is hard. And I'm not the kind of person that thinks that everybody is supposed to be like me. I mean,
Mhm.
because too much of a Patience Ferguson is just too much. I'm my own person. But I think that those times, particularly when you have taken a stand on certain things that may not be acceptable, you have to take a step back and say, okay, what is this really about? And that's
Mm.
I think it's very important. And I would say this to anybody, make sure that particularly in a workplace or even in relationships, make sure that it's the environment that is really going to help you do your best work. And some of us, depending upon maybe our financial situation, everybody's different. So I will never say that it's an absolute this way. I think it is very important to really understand where you can make the biggest contribution. Because
Mm.
when we all have to have the bills get paid without question. But at the same time, it has been my experience, if you're in an environment that is really not allowing you to do your best work, it's going to cost you. And I have
Mm,
friends, people that it has cost them because where they were, the money may have been good, etc., but their health wasn't good. Their
mm,
relationships weren't good, but they had a really good paycheck, but at what expense? And I think those are things that everybody's different. So I can't say, that everybody is going to subscribe to that because depending upon where you are financially, you may not have that opportunity, but you've got to have something that holds on to you because you will pay a price if you're somewhere. One of my former pastors used to say this. He would say, go where you're celebrated and not where you're tolerated.
mm,
That's very powerful, and I've had friends of mine, none of us attend this church, all of us are leaders, and we will go back to that. A friend of mine just last week said that to me, "Well, you know what our pastor used to say, go where you're
mm,
celebrated and not where you're tolerated." And that's just how I just believe in that. I believe that while I'm not gonna say there's no perfect workplace at all, but it's been my experience, the closest that you can get to an organization that really aligns with what you believe, they're going to get the best out of you and you're going to get the best out of them.
mm,
And so that's something that I've just even subconsciously have done, I've looked at, because I think that that's when both of what you do and how you do it, you can make the greatest impact to the work, to your family, to your community when you think about how important that really is.
So powerful. I'm sitting with that for a while here as I really absorb that. Both what your former pastor said, go where you're celebrated and not where you're tolerated, which I love how you really talked about how there's certainly privilege with being able to be choosy about where you're going, but can you still work towards getting yourself into a place where you're celebrated and just the world that opens up to you and the potential that you're able to live in.
And you may have to, because I always think that's optimal, but I'm also a realist to know that may not be, everybody might not be at a position or a place because of circumstances where they can fully be in that role. However, can you do it in your volunteer work?
Mm,
Right? There is a way that you can, it's amazing. And I've seen this happen where people may be able to live out their values, say in a volunteer capacity, which can position them at some point in their lives to then make a career change because at least in this volunteer capacity, they've been able to have an opportunity to volunteer in an organization or a cause that aligns with their values that could possibly at some point help them relook at their career, relook at their life, relook at their path. But they've picked some area where they can start making those moves and still have a paycheck coming in.
mhm. Yep. So good. So good. Final question for you, patients. This has been wonderful. For leaders listening, especially those trying to live their values inside complex organizations or in volunteer opportunities, what encouragement would you have for them as they go into whatever they're headed into next?
I think be true to who you are. You may not be called to everybody, but you're called to somebody. And the other thing I would say is be careful to who speaks into your life. At some point, you will be challenged and you will have to make a decision, but make sure that you surround yourself with truth tellers, not truth breakers.
Mm,
Make sure that you have people in your life that are going to be honest and authentic with you, but not people who are going to tear you down because you're a byproduct of the relationships that you have in your life. And that's what I would say to people. And find joy in whatever you do.
mm,
Take care of yourself. These are simple things, but it's just been my experience that those are the kinds of things that I think all leaders need. And the last thing I would say is never, ever minimize the role and the value of lived experience. Lived experience is the tuition that every single person, I would say, needs to understand and also embrace. Your lived experience is equally, if not more important than the education that you have, the degrees that you have. Your lived experience is equally as valuable to you as your education and your career.
Beautifully articulated. Patience, your leadership is both authentic and steady and visceral. I feel it in every cell of my body. So thank you for imparting your authentic self, your clarity around values, and your own lived experience here with us today. We really appreciate the wisdom that you shared with us.
Well, thank you for the opportunity. I really appreciate it.
And to our listeners, thanks for joining us today on Leadership Matters. Join us next week for another episode. Thanks for joining us for today's episode of Leadership Matters. If today's episode resonated with you, would you do me a favor and share it with someone you care about? To learn more about the work the Bailey Group is doing in the world, check us out at thebaileygroup.com or follow us over on LinkedIn. We love sharing useful articles, helpful resources, and valuable tools to help you expand your leadership capacity. Like and subscribe, and join us next time for more honest conversations.